Hello, everyone, and we're live. Welcome to the CuppaChino Club's social TV channel. An empowered woman is someone who knows her strengths and isn't afraid to embrace it. We invite you to join us as we start the COVID-19 conversation on day one of the 21-day lockdown here in South Africa. And let's see how we can continue to inspire, encourage, and empower others through conversation. Don't go away. We will be right back. If you're just joining us, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Bridgetti Limbanda. I'm a live video camera confidence coach, and I host and produce live video shows to increase brand awareness through storytelling. I'm passionate about responsible social media advocacy. And today, join us as we start the COVID-19 conversation on day one of the 21-day lockdown here in South Africa as we continue to inspire, encourage, and empower others through conversation. My co host is Viola Manuel. She's an accomplished senior executive. She's been nominated for multiple awards. Viola was the CEO of the Cape Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the executive director of the Cape IT Initiative. She was a member of the Western Cape Premier's Council of Skills, to mention a few. She also serves as a non-executive on the National Sea Rescue Institute and is also the deputy chair of the Cape Town Stadium. She's got two entrepreneurial ventures, which is G&B Retail and also Afri Wellness. But she's most proud of the fact that she's mom to a 10-year-old son, Shay. And right now, we all just mainly being parents. We're
Mm-hmm.
all at home, almost all over the world, and the struggle is real. We know what it's like to work at home with children. Some of us have been doing this for a long time, but for others, it's a whole new world. Viola, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Brigetti, and welcome to all our guests and our viewers. Very exciting times ahead for us. I must tell you that being the mom of a 10-year-old under lockdown is going to be challenging. I had to say to Shay today, just pace yourself. He wanted to do all the activities we had planned, so I had to say to him, just pace yourself. There's still 20 post-its on our mirror because we've created a little countdown calendar. And I said to him, there's still 20 post-its on that, on that mirror. We've got a long way to go. So it's been interesting. It's been I think it's been a really eye-opening experience, just understanding where people are and how people think about things like this. I mean, I watched TV this. Oops, sorry about that. I watched TV this morning, and it was just crazy to see people's understanding of how serious this actually is. And it's very scary, Brigetti. I mean, when you sit down and you watch TV and hear somebody saying that COVID-19 isn't something that's real, it's very, very frightening.
Yeah, I think it's not just understanding. I think it's also lack of understanding. Um, People are just not quite getting the full picture, of where things need to be at.
Yes.
So, our words matter, our communication matter because right now, misinformation, disinformation, fake news is a real thing, and we need to really fight that. In fact, in South Africa, it's an offense. It's a criminal offense if you maliciously spread misinformation, fake news, or disinformation. It's the last thing we want to do right now. And we've had our own fair share of tech gremlins this morning. I think with so many
Yes.
people on the internet, we just had one challenge after the other. And so we've got two amazing guests with us today. Terine Lott-Cupido is the founder and managing director of EmpowerLink Services. Terine is the mom of 2 toddlers, but she's also an experienced chartered HR practitioner with the South African Board for People Practice. She's also the founder and owner of EmpowerLink Services, an HR consulting company focusing on small to medium-sized businesses. And I think we're going to really appreciate her input on how the COVID-19 is impacting us as women and just as workers in this whole sphere that we all face at the moment. It's a whole new world of unknowns. So we're going to draw on some of her skills, and she's joining us via telephone. So if the sound isn't as clear as it could be, that is the reason why we've had so many tech gremlins today, but we're going to try and run with this as best we possibly can. And our other amazing guest is Lisa Wood. Lisa is an attorney with Guy and Associates. She's an attorney and labor relations specialist practicing in the southern suburbs. Guy and Associates is a boutique firm which practices exclusively in the area of labor relations consulting, training, and litigation. And again, her input's going to be absolutely invaluable because of the space that she's in. And in addition to her work as an attorney, Lisa volunteers on the board of Sisters Incorporated, which is an NPO and shelter for survivors of gender-based violence. She's responsible for the legal portfolio, which includes advising in areas of human resources, labor relations, and social development. So I think we're going to draw on a wealth of experience from Lisa.
Yeah.
Shall we invite them on the show, Viola?
Please. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Lisa and Terine, welcome to the show, and we're very, very pleased to have you join us.
Thank you so much.
First of all, I want to let you know we are supposed to be live on Facebook. We are live on LinkedIn. We are live on Periscope, and we are live on the CuppaChino Club channel on YouTube. Now, Facebook's been having issues for the last couple of days, and I was hoping that it would be okay, but it's not. So our Facebook viewers are going to have to catch this on the replay. We will upload the video manually because it seems as if we're not transmitting to Facebook. So anyone watching us on LinkedIn, on Periscope, and on YouTube, welcome to the show. I'm going to try and follow the comments on LinkedIn on my mobile phone here. We're trying to just really work around all the tech issues. So welcome, everyone. So I'm going to say hello. We've got a few people on LinkedIn here. Marcello, welcome from the USA. He's in Atlanta. Angie Shamlin, she says the struggle is real. That's for sure. We're not going to argue with that one. The struggle definitely is real. So can we dive right into our questions, Terine and Lisa? Lisa, shall we start off with you?
Sure.
Okay, so our first question is, can your employer dismiss you if you stay away from work because you become infected? Now, right now, most of us are under lockdown and we're home for 21 days, but we do have people out there like our essential services who are currently working. So for now, that would definitely apply to them. We want to say hello to Terence. He is watching from Boksburg. Welcome, Terence. Lisa, can we start off with you?
Sure. So if someone is factually infected, they actually have the virus, then no, you can't be dismissed. But I mean, with the classic legal saying that we always like to add is it depends, because if if there are policies and procedures in place where someone has to report in a certain way, so they have to notify of their absence, they have to let their employer know in a specific manner how, why they're not going to be at work and whether it's a legitimate reason to not be at work. So being sick is one, but if you don't follow those policies and procedures, then that could still lead to disciplinary action being taken, despite the fact that you do have legitimate illness if you don't follow that. But then the other aspect to this is if you're not actually infected, but perhaps you just suspect you are, then I would say that the employer needs to weigh in on that, and they need to decide whether they agree that there is a reasonable expectation that you are infected. Otherwise, you can't just decide that you're staying home. You can't say, I went to the shops yesterday, so I must be infected, therefore I'm not coming to work. It must be a legitimate reason that perhaps your partner has had a positive test, or that there's something to substantiate your belief that you're infected. And then if you are ill, then certainly not. Follow the processes. Just let your employer know. You can't be dismissed if you're genuinely ill with this virus.
Right. So I just want to weigh in there. There was one example that I heard of, for example, and unfortunately this gentleman did die. But I mean, what if he, for example, he phoned his sister the one day and said, look, I'm just feeling incredibly ill. He didn't at that point know that he had the virus. And for the next couple of days, his sister was trying to make contact with him and she couldn't, because at that point he was immediately admitted into ICU, and that stopped his contact with the outside world. So would you say that in situations like that, it would have to be handled on a case-by-case matter?
I think that that's very fair. It would be case by case. And you know what, if it really got to that, it may potentially lead to someone being dismissed for being AWOL. But then as soon as you found out those legitimate reasons for why someone couldn't be in contact and why they had to be away from work, I'd say that that employer has to almost retract that decision of dismissal, because there were extenuating factors that they couldn't have possibly anticipated at the time of making that decision, and they wouldn't have dismissed if they'd had that information.
Right. Terine, could you weigh in on that?
Sure. So from my side, I agree with Lisa, and basically it is around what procedures you have in place. So in the South African law, we are governed, by certain labor legislation, and so in different countries, they would have to actually check what the company's procedure is with regards to absenteeism, and then obviously there's the legality. So there's different laws in different countries. So you have to take that into account, and that also has to be communicated with the employees, and they need to understand what is expected of them in the case of absence. So for instance, now with lockdown, ideally the employers should have communicated with their employees what is the protocol if you are sick while on lockdown, what do you do? And so it's really about communicating the rules and making sure that staff understand that. And if it's broken, there needs to be a procedure of what they should follow when there is a rule that is broken. For instance, making contact with the company to notify them. And then there needs to be a justified reason, as Lisa said, for dismissal. You can't just simply dismiss. In the South African context, you can't just dismiss an employee simply because they have COVID-19.
Thanks very much, Terine.
Can I just jump in there? I think it's very important, especially with us having so many international viewers, to just, I think, reiterate that the discussion we're having is within the South African context. Each country has their own rules and regulations, but I think one of the things that is just sort of universal is the more communication there is, the better it is. So if something hasn't been covered, rather state that that's not been covered, but I do have a question around it and address that to the right people. For example, your HR department. One of the questions that I'd like to just ask, if I may, which has been something that lots of people have been contacting me when they heard about the show, they've been asking this, and that is, can you actually be forced to take leave? Can you be forced to use these 21 days as your annual leave?
Sure. Well, I can jump in there. I think that was going to be one of our questions that came up later. So in terms of that whole can you force annual leave situation, as a general rule, and I would say the default position would be no. But that being said, it's quite common, especially in the employment contracts that I've drafted, that we'll put in a clause which speaks to that. And it's not necessarily that we have anticipated something that's like this pandemic, but there will be a clause that says the employee acknowledges and agrees that they will take annual leave during any period of shutdown of the company. So considering this is a shutdown, the employee has agreed ahead of time that they would use up their annual leave during a period of shutdown. And I would say if you have that in your employment contract, you can definitely enforce that at this time. But for anyone who is just relying on the legislation and doesn't have those provisions in their agreements, then I would say the default is no, this is not annual leave, but it certainly should be an option to employees. So if an employer otherwise can't pay for this period at all, that is one method for an employee to get remuneration during these 21 days. They could take their annual leave and they're not going to lose out on pay as a result. But I feel like it really just must be at the election of the employee if there is no provision in the contract.
Okay.
But I think, the communication, from what I'm hearing, is communication is key. Because if you don't communicate, a lot of things can be resolved if we just communicate. Terine, would you like to weigh in on this?
Sure. I actually, that was one of the questions that we've been asked as HR this week, and so yesterday the Department of Employment and Labour actually sent out communication in that regard, where they actually spoke about the fact that employees are given a leave provision under the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. So there is leave provisions. However, this is the situation in one company may differ. So one company might be able to offer special leave, whereas another company might not be in a fortunate position. So it is really around making sure that you listen to the staff and also give them an opportunity, because it is their annual leave, but the company can specify based on operational requirements, I need you to take this leave right now because based on operational requirements, but the employee has an option of really looking at what leave am I going to take? Is it annual leave or is it going to be unpaid leave, and am I going to make use of the relief funds that are available? So the statement that has been shared by government, I will share with you that you can. I will share it on the CuppaChino Club group so that they can actually see that statement from government.
Okay.
Thanks, Terine. So another question that many would like to know is, companies are under a lot of stress right now. And I've heard of companies that have done retrenchments. Can you use this situation is it legal to retrench due to the lockdown and the pandemic that we've got at the moment?
Yeah, so I think that's where a lot of the it's maybe just coming down to language use, actually. So yes, the root cause is going to be coronavirus, why a lot of companies are now in financial distress, but that's not why the retrenchment happens. It's not because of the virus. It's because of what the virus has affected in our economy. So a company that's in financial distress and simply cannot afford its current staff complement or to even really render services because there isn't a demand anymore. It's that financial aspect and that economic aspect as to why they can implement retrenchments, but it's stemming from coronavirus, but it's not the actual reason why you would put on, this is our operational requirement, is that's not coronavirus, but it's what it's caused in our economy. And I think it's very fair to say that we can expect a lot of retrenchments following the lockdown and even leading up to it. We've definitely been advising on some as well, that everyone is just suffering so much that reduction of their staff is probably inevitable across the board.
I think it's particularly true for companies who possibly, well, small companies definitely, entrepreneurs who's just employing one person, for example, may now not be able to carry that person. There's lots of use cases like that where they simply have been living month to month, and now they're faced with a situation where, I think I was saying to somebody in conversation yesterday that your liquidity or your ability to trade is as strong as the ability of your clients to trade. Because if the clients that's responsible for your income is in financial difficulty, that jeopardizes, it has a knock-on effect on your business.
Yeah. I also think part of the reality of this conversation that, I think we had the conversation preparing for the program, is that there are a lot of small businesses that are operating under the radar. So a lot of the sort of rescue plans and a lot of the stuff that's being put forward by trade and industry, as well as the other ministries, to assist small businesses. One of the I think criteria is you need to have been compliant, you need to be SARS registered, etc. You need to be, have tax clearance and all those good things. And a lot of the small businesses are just not there for whatever reason. So this is going to actually have such major implications for the SMME sector that I really don't think we truly understand the implications of just trying to keep your business open during such a tremendously difficult time.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say hello to a shout out to Guy Harris, is watching us on LinkedIn. He says hello to you, Viola, as well.
Hi, Guy.
So some of the employees that are currently fulfilling positions in essential services are wanting to know if they would be entitled to danger pay because of the coronavirus. Lisa and Terine, can we have your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of a danger pay, that's not, as a general rule, that's not something that we have a concept of in South African employment law. There are certain industries and collective agreements that provide for an allowance of sorts if you work in a hazardous environment or work in, a specific dangerous, whether it's equipment or just the environment itself, then you get an additional amount on your pay, which accounts for this. But that for your standard position of people that aren't in a specific industry that's identified, that there isn't a default legislation provision that we can rely on to give someone additional pay for dangerous scenarios. And just looking at the regulations that have come in recently, the COIDA, the workmen's compensation, they have brought forward payment if you contract the virus, but that's sort of the extent of now your work has become dangerous and you actually got the virus at work. You will then be compensated for your time off as a result of contracting the virus, but there's nothing to assist you with now that you're at work and it's dangerous. There's nothing in that regard that is present in South African law.
Right. Terine, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with what Lisa's saying, is that the only provisions that's really been made available is the temporary employer relief scheme and also the disaster management fund within the South African context. So that the danger pay specifications and the actual allowances has not been made clear in any of these funds and relief funds to help us during this abnormal situation that we face.
I think one thing we can all agree on is that we trying to navigate our way through uncharted waters. We've never had the situation like this before. It's a global situation, and each country's got its different legislations that covers how we deal with the situation. And I think many of us are just feeling our way through. And it's kind of a fluid situation that can change sometimes from day to day, sometimes from hour to hour. So I think, one thing we all can agree on is that nothing is cast in stone. Things can change, but I think we've got a basis from which to work on within the South African context anyway.
And so if I can also just add, the Occupational Health and Safety Act, while it doesn't provide for additional remuneration for staff if they're in a dangerous scenario, it does certainly place an obligation on the employer to do everything that they reasonably can to make the workplace as safe as possible. So, if you do feel like something is not being done, perhaps there isn't enough hand wash or sanitizer available, you aren't spraying down after every use, that these are measures that an employer should be taking responsibility for and ensuring that the staff that are providing these essential services are as safe as they can be.
I think it's quite important for us to talk about legislation, if I can just jump in here. So we've got the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, which is obviously very important. The Health and Safety Act is very important. Are there any other bits of legislation that's going to help us actually navigate this as an employer, for example, especially in sort of the SMME sector? Are there any other pieces of legislation that I now need to sort of get under my belt? Because I think one of the things that this virus has done is that it's made people a lot more responsible in terms of their employment, the rights of their employees. I've had some of my friends, I said to them, have you looked at your employment contract? And they don't even know where it is. So, it's really become very clear that lots of people are going to try their best, I think, to just learn from this experience as much as they can. But I wanted to ask, is there any other piece of legislation that we should be getting employers and employees to look at during this time?
Yeah, well, the one that I've mentioned, COIDA, which is the compensation for occupational injuries, that would certainly weigh in here if you do contract the virus. Certainly the regulations that are being released almost daily at this point to do with the Disaster Act, they are also having impact within the workplace. And I would say policies, employers are releasing their own internal policies as a result of trying to deal with these situations. And I would say employees must certainly be keeping up to date with these releases, because the employer is going to be implementing things down to, when you have your check-in, whether it's with a video conference or whatever you're using to now work remotely if you're still functioning, or even in the essential services, there'll probably be numerous more policies implemented to try and deal with the fact that there are new procedures for safety and sanitation, and everyone's going to have to abide by these in order to keep up with the regulations that are being released. So I would say in terms of legislation, it's mainly just the basic conditions and the compensation for occupational injuries and the Health and Safety Act, but that doesn't mean that we must be disregarding internal documents as well, and all the regulations that are being released to help us kind of navigate this. So legislation is usually very broad, and it's the regulations that give you that additional detail and information on how to interpret what's required of us.
Okay, so just a follow-up question, Lisa, for a lot of people who don't know. So yeah, there are all these pieces of legislation now. What takes preeminence? So if my company, look, most employers try desperately to align their policies and procedures to current legislation. But what exactly is the position I find myself in when the policy and procedure or my employer is not behaving in a way that's that's positive? It's not reflected by the basic conditions of employment, but they hide behind the internal policy. What trumps, which one trumps which?
So that's an interesting question. I would say, again, it depends. What it's going to come down to is your employer's policy asking you to infringe a piece of legislation? Then that can never be the case. You can never do something that is asking you to break a law. But an employer certainly can implement more rules than legislation provides for. So, something along the lines of, if you are going to be absent, you must call in by 7 o'clock in the morning. You're not going to find that in any piece of legislation, but it's a very reasonable requirement by an employer, and it's motivated by an operational need that they have to replace you and find alternatives for the rest of the day. So I would say the policy, they operate in unison and side by side until the policy asks you to do something that would be against the legislation. Then the legislation is going to win.
Terine, any comment on that?
Yes. So from a, I would say from a practical, because I mean I'm also an SMME. So for me, I think what is important is to understand that leave falls under your basic conditions of employment act, so your leave provisions, and so that just basically specifies that employees are entitled to the annual leave. So that's the one thing. Then then we've got the unemployment insurance fund, which talks about UIF, and that is really so in other countries there's also unemployment insurance funds, as far as I'm aware, and so the government has made provisions specifically for lockdown and where companies are in distress that the UIF the funds within the UIF will be used where there's reduced work hours, where there is short time. So employees are able to access that, and then also due to illness benefits. So for instance, if an employee has contracted the virus and they have exhausted their sick leave, they can then go and they've got all the necessary documentation to say that they are positive in terms of COVID-19. They could apply for the UIF benefits under the illness benefits. And then with regards to the Occupational Health and Safety Act in South Africa, that talks about risk assessments that actually need to be done within the workplace. So if the essential services employees are working, has the company made sure that they've got enough hand sanitizer, that they are wearing masks, that they have been educated, etc. So there's different categories, and the Department of Employment and Labour has a workplace preparedness guide for employers, and all these guides I will share after this talk with you. And then also, as Lisa mentioned, if the person contracts the virus while working, they then covered under what was called workman's compensation, and I think that is what is called in other countries, but it actually falls under the Compensation for Occupational Diseases Act, and then they've got a special regulation for COVID-19 specifically. Then you've got the disaster, the UIF or National Disaster Benefit, and so that is where the employers actually have to apply for that benefit. And there's three. So there's also the Temporary Employee Relief Fund, and so that is where employers can apply for specific benefits to cover, like a wage subsidy, or to cover wages and training, or to look at assisting the company for a turnaround solution. So how do they turn around their business and make it profitable again after the lockdown? So all these regulations, there's lots of information, but owners and entrepreneurs and SMMEs need to make sure that they read through it, because there is some relief. It might not be enough, but there is some relief, and that they should make use of it and ask for companies that can assist them in getting the documentation and paperwork in place. They should try their best to actually access those funds.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for that input. That's very, very valuable information. We look forward to those links that we'll put into the comments.
Sure.
As you mentioned. Thanks for that, Terine. Lisa, as an attorney, and I think attorneys form part of essential services that is currently carrying on. What business tools are you using to be able to work from home and be compliant with the lockdown, or are you actually going into the office?
No, as far as I'm aware, I am not an essential service. So, but luckily we are able to completely function remotely. So we're not really inhibited by the fact that we can't be at the office. What we've been doing is we make use of sort of several platforms. One of them is Asana. It's a free platform. It does have a paid version, but we just make use of the free one, and that's great for managing tasks. So you can put tasks up on Asana and you can assign them to specific people within your team, and you can provide them with templates or documentation and information on that platform as well, and you can assign a deadline for that task. And then the other free platform we've been making use of is Slack. So that's sort of like a group IM type of platform, but you can link it to Asana. So you can also link the tasks within your chat, and you can assign different portals. So you can have a client per portal, and it's all free and available. And then lots of video chats, really, on whatever platform you have available to you, whether it's Skype or Google Chats or Microsoft Teams. There's many available, and we're basically just staying in touch. You're kind of constantly online, and you can quickly type a little message and you get a response from your colleagues. But we also work very independently and as a team. So we're not, I think, what we aren't able to perhaps give you advice on from our experience is if you have a workplace that requires a lot of oversight and management in terms of the products, because we work independently, we mainly just want to chat about topics and get a bit of input and someone else's perspective, but we don't have that situation where someone really needs to be constantly reviewing our work. And I think maybe if Terine has a platform that she's using which is more to do with that kind of management, then that might also be helpful to those types of workplaces.
And are these tools that you already used before, or are they new tools that you had to find? And what has the adoption been like for your staff?
So I think the only thing that's actually new is the video chat. We were using Asana anyway. We probably, I would say, amped up how much we're using it. We're certainly, it's all we have now. We can't just pop our head into someone's office. But Asana we were using, and Slack we were already using. But the video chats, that's been great to still have, these check-ins and chat things through. So we actually had one to do with COVID-19 just before we started this live stream, just chatting through the different benefits that are available, because we have new ones coming out every single day. We need to wrap our heads around, which one would be the best for which type of client and which type of employer will want to make use of which one, because there's just so many at this point.
I think the choices are overwhelming.
Yeah.
But the fact that we can actually do that now is amazing. And I think we didn't realize how, even though we are having to physically have a distance from a physical perspective, but we can still feel connected and be connected through video conferencing, and we can still have our business meetings virtually and still feel very connected to one another.
Yeah.
Yeah, with us, we're doing all our, board meetings. We're using exactly some of the tools Lisa mentioned: Zoom, Microsoft Teams. It's strange. You have to get your head around it, because there are certain interpersonal nuances that are missing. But I think one of the things we'll find is that more and more, I think once we've basically overcome this major challenge with COVID-19, I think a lot of boards might, and a lot of businesses might actually continue to adopt certain behaviors. It says, it's 21 days to adopt a new behavior. So I'm certain that a lot of businesses will look at the efficiency of a lot of these technologies and then innovations, and actually just make that part of their daily, the new normal, is going to start creeping into what it is that we do.
A really interesting development that's happened in the world of litigation is the courts have been forced to not come in with paper and file because you can't go into the courts, and they're currently making use of service and filing by email. So I think that would be absolutely fantastic if we can get to a point where that continues. It'll take us into
Yes.
a whole new level of getting out of that old-fashioned way of doing things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it does certainly. Sure, go ahead.
Sure. I think for our business, we have been in a fortunate position where we actually implemented cloud-based technology to be able to work remotely. So it's basically the work is the platform is on the internet and you access it. Your logins, you can log in anywhere as long as you've got an internet connection. So from a HR point of view, there's also Bamboo HR, which is a cloud-based HR information system technology, which is also specifically, it's a global platform, so it's used across the world. And so especially if you're looking to expand from a company and you're looking for platforms that are used in other countries, and so that you don't have different platforms in different countries, it's also good to look at tools that are used outside of South Africa. And so there are other HR packages that are being used, but that's also something to consider. And then for instance, Microsoft Office 365, that has been really useful for our business. So we use Microsoft Teams, and then you can also do Skype video calls. So I think the important part is to keep the productivity levels going while your staff are working remotely. So we have a weekly meeting where we would
Lisa, I think we lost her.
Okay.
Okay, sorry guys, we've just been having so many challenges with technology. The show was supposed to start and we were so late with everybody. Just the internet's been really, really bad, and yeah, so it is one of those things. But I do want to just thank our guests. It's about time for us to close off anyway. I know that there are going to be so many more questions, and please feel free to send your questions through to our platforms. And if we have loads of questions, we'll definitely invite Terine and Lisa back onto the show, and hopefully by then we'll also be able to field those questions as well. It's
able to work productively at home. Sorry, at home. Yeah.
I think we lost connection there from Viola. Did you get that last bit?
We lost both of you for a very long time.
Internet gremlins, thanks to the current situation.
Yes, but what we have promised our viewers is that if we have if they're welcome to send through all the comments and questions. Okay, so they're welcome to send through a lot more comments and questions, and if anything, if we have a stream of comments and questions, we'll definitely invite Lisa and Terine back onto the show and almost have a part 2 to our discussion. It would be very interesting, I think, to see how things develop over the next few days. A lot of challenges that we are not even aware of now in terms of the workplace are going to rear their heads. And it might be a good idea for us to have part 2 to the show. But in spite of all our gremlins and my cell phone falling and us losing you on occasion, I think we've had some very valuable input. So I do want to thank everybody, just from my side, for being very patient with us on the show, and just the content was amazing.
Well, thank you from my side as well. Thank you, Terine, for joining us. And thank you, Lisa. And we'll keep an eye on the comments. And I think it would be incredibly valuable for us to do a part 2 to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting us. It was a fantastic opportunity, and I would be happy to do a part 2.
Thank you, ladies, and thank you, everyone. Stay strong.
Thanks.
And let us know in the comments if you've got any questions.
Yeah, I think I just also want to Brigitte say that as the CuppaChino Club, we're going to be doing a daily check-in with some of the ladies who belong to the club, just get a finger on the pulse in terms of how you're coping with every day. So the show will be, we're hoping to air the show with at least 2 of our ladies who are part of the show, a part of the club at 10 o'clock every day. We can't promise that we'll always be dressed up, and we can't promise that we'll always have makeup on, or that our eyebrows will be plucked or anything like that. But it would be great to see how we cope by day 21 with all these little luxuries that we've become so familiar with and so comfortable with. So we're going to be documenting all 21 days, and I'm very excited about that.
Thanks, everyone, and have a great day further. And so from us
Thank
at the
you.
CuppaChino Club, it's goodbye for now.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.